Good morning, Joy Andrews, County Administrator, in studio with us, and we've got a few things on the docket to talk about. I guess we will start with transportation. So this is a story hit the news last week, I think, of groundbreaking from the County Commission on 210. I'm told a little bit of blowback here when this picture kind of dropped. A lot of people kind of asking the same question we hear a lot, right, over the last few years is, why aren't developers paying for this? Why aren't they kicking in more? This is their project, right? So can you shed any light on this topic, and what are we doing going forward?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about it so that I can make some correction. I think there is some wrong impression, and not really our residents' fault. I think we could have done a better job to explain. It is, development responsibility. It is a very complicated issue. It's also a legal matter. It's a contractual matter. But I can say with the confidence that 210 expansion is entirely paid for by development and developers. So that's not true that why the developers not paying for it. Mm-hmm. So what happened was Twin Creek, which is the development, came in. I'm going to say 2008, right after recession. There was some negotiation. At the time, the board really wanted to promote and incentivize development because we didn't have it much going on. And so it was a policy decision at the time, and it was on paper a great development. There was a lot of stipulations that were built in the development agreement, which was great. So it comes to time for implementation. The developer did not act very proactively on building the roads and parks and other infrastructures that he was responsible and it still is responsible and obligated to fulfill, to offer the mediation and mitigation that he's required to for any really impact on the residents. Particularly the biggest one is transportation. So it comes to 2021, we start to really look at what his obligations were and if there was any overdue on obligations, and then we discovered that the transportation, the benchmark or the milestone or phasing, development obligations are fulfilled by phases. So usually a development agreement will prescribe the phase that you're at and at which phase that you will be responsible for, let's say, build a park or 4-laning 210. And the developer at the time, we believe around 2022, that he was responsible for completing the 4-laning of the 210 from Beach Walk community entrance all the way to C.E. Wilson, which is less than 1 mile. So that was a problem. And we went through a number of rounds of negotiation, mediation, and the board really came to a conclusion that there isn't really a whole lot of negotiation we can do with this particular developer. And they decided unanimously, really voted to give county attorney's office to pursue any and all legal measures that we have in our hands to pursue the obligations fulfillment. So, after a couple of months, I think the developer came to the table, decided that he's willing. Now, it's not really for him to be willing or not.
Right, you already made the agreement.
He agreed.
Yeah.
He wasn't willing. As a developer now, he wasn't willing.
He was forced to come to the table. We handcuffed him to the table. And so we agreed on the MOU. The board recently, before the construction of, the groundbreaking of 210, signed MOU with John Kinsey, who's the developer of Twin Creek, for him to agree to a methodology how we calculate his financial obligation. The road,
Joy, and just so everybody out there knows, an MOU is a memorandum of understanding.
Thank you, Troy. And we really concluded a long time ago we do not want him to construct this road because we cannot put the actual road, the safety, the standard, and the completion date on his hands anymore. So we decided to take over the construction, and we billed him for every penny that he's responsible for through this memorandum of understanding. So there is no off the hook from his financial responsibility, and his responsibility is beyond road. There are parks, there are fire stations,
What a bummer for him to act like this, though.
There are different things. Well, I can say this here. To me, it's purely a business decision, especially when you get developers don't live here and they don't experience the pain we do every day to go through the traffic. So that is something that we learned, and then the board was, and I kudos to them. They made the decision very quickly, and at the time, Megan was our county attorney, and they said, David, we want you to pursue any legal measures that we have to make sure that he's going to pay for what he's owed to us.
True, yeah.
So the whole construction of that less than a mile is $15 million, really expanding from 2-lane to 6 lanes. His obligation is to widen it to 4 lanes, but because of the mobilization cost and the saving that we could accomplish by building 6-lane with the 4-lane at the same time, the difference is really less than $2 million to go from 4 to 6. So, I think it's a good business decision to just go to 6, because eventually we're going to get to that capacity with the high school at the beach side, and then being the bottleneck from beach side to 95 to 210 west. It just makes sense to go all the way to 6.
Joy, and we talked about this earlier. Does he already have houses that are being sold right now?
Yes.
Okay. Why didn't the county just hold his certificates of occupancy? Because I had to do that at Palencia. I don't know. You might have just been starting your career then. I had to do that at Palencia because they tried to do a similar thing with parks.
Yeah.
And we held their certificates of occupancy, and miraculously, they couldn't sell, so they weren't getting revenue coming in, and all of a sudden they showed up at the table.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering, why didn't they use that same strategy?
So that strategy was on the table among other ones. There were a couple complications on that strategy. One is that a moratorium requires exceptional resolution because we're talking about property rights. In addition to that, Beach Walk is a mixed-use development, and there are commercials, there are residentials, there are hospitality. The ownership and the entitlement in that development is very convoluted. There are lands that were already sold.
It's a breach of contract.
So when you hold a moratorium, then you have to sort out who else is going to be negatively affected by that. And they weren't at the table. They weren't responsible for the overdoing of the responsibilities. So that was something that our legal was sorting through. And then miraculously, the developer came to the table. So we didn't have to exercise that moratorium, but it is still on the table. And he hasn't paid yet. Right now, what we're doing is that we have a contract between the developer and the board, basically saying, based on this calculation, this road standard, you're going to owe us whatever the calculation is going to be. And we think it's going to be over $9 million from him. And if he decides to not pay any less than 9, then we will explore all of these options. We'll take him to the court. We will, and I'm probably going to get in trouble with our county attorney's office to talk about legal strategy, but moratorium is not off the table.
Okay. No, because I mean, it worked very effectively. I mean, it was a breach of contract on his part, and he hasn't paid yet. So, you don't get to drive the car off the car lot until you pay the bill.
Right.
So to me, it was a strategy. And it's a strategy,
it worked for you,
and it worked for us because But it was like you said, there's some other developers and some other things involved in this, and mine was one individual developer at one individual thing. So there is a difference there, but I know the strategy works because if he's not bringing in revenue, you're going to get him to that table really quick.
Trust me, myself, our board, we're not afraid to go nuclear. So that is the option still. We're going to keep all options on table for sure to make sure that he pays.
And what do we do to avoid this situation in the future? What do we build into these contracts going forward? What do we change about policy going forward to make sure that we're not having to come to the table like this in the future, that people know they have to fulfill these obligations because it's not going to get to this point again.
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the commissioners currently on board any of them really weren't part of the approval of this development.
Right.
That was way before their time on the board. I can give you an example that Christian Whitehurst, who is, really kind of the leading commissioner on the Greenbrier negotiation, Hilo negotiation, which I think the board at the end came together to agree on, that looks like it's going to be the trend. Now, I'm not going to predict how in the future they're going to make policy, but that was a big deal. I think it was a turning point on how we deal with our developers' responsibility and in what way they will mitigate those impact, and what was proposed to the developer, and proposing meaning that if you don't do it, we won't give you the approval, was that you're going to pay upfront. So basically, in Hilo's development, I think Commissioner Whitehurst and then the rest of Commissioner Dean, Commissioner Lamo, and Commissioner Arnold, I couldn't remember Commissioner Joseph was also on the board, but they basically held the developer accountable by saying that you can forget about this development unless you pay upfront. So we got $20 million upfront for the widening of Greenbrier and Veterans Parkway area. So that was a huge shift of policy and policy decision sort of methodology they used. And I can safely predict that is going to be the methodology. Most of developments is going to be reviewed at. Of course, there's always every development is different. We are just so blessed. Everybody wants to move here, and so some want to go south, some want to go north. So the mitigation of impact is different from south to north, from north to east, from west to east. So there is going to be some flexibility on how they want to adopt that. But I think upfront mitigation is what we're looking at to avoid future situation like this.
And it's got to be in well before your time. I mean, and you see a lot of times, like when you got here, parks had to be first. Well, that started because of the mistake we made at World Golf Village. All right, World Golf Village, we didn't, in the DRI, we didn't ask for enough. And we thought, we were just so happy to have that many houses in the early 90s and stuff. And I didn't get the parks up front. Right now, just now, it's under construction, the regional park that should have been at World Golf Village in the 1990s.
Wow.
So we're talking 30 years later. It's tough to kind of put the toothpaste back in the tube.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I 100% am supporting everything being up front.
Yeah.
And with that said, obviously we've seen another kind of element of all this over the last couple of years has been price increases, right? So are we building in when we're saying, hey, you got to pay this $20 million up front? Does that account for in 3 years, maybe when we get to this road project, this is what it's going to cost in 3 years? Or are we going to have to say, well, they committed to $20 million, but now it costs $40 million to build this. So
Good
now
question.
we have to throw in that extra $20 million.
And that is really, really good question. Let me just talk about State Road 16. What a sore subject. Another litigation that we're going through is with Grand Oaks. At the time when the board, and this is also way back, and this is also a out-of-town developer who does not live here. And they agreed to, in fact, I remember because we just went through mediation. I can't talk about what we talked about in mediation, but we essentially broke up. We can't agree on things. So at the time of the approval of development, there was explicit, capture on camera, with all the board meeting, there was explicit a promise of construction of 16 from basically 95 Outlet Mall area all the way to 3 miles in front of Grand Oaks. At the time, the estimated cost of construction is $15 million. Now, we captured that number in agreement really just more for FYI, like it's about $15 million, but your responsibility is to actually make that road happen. Well, now 2023, the developer can't do it because they missed the window of opportunity to build a road, and the construction cost of $3 million is close to $60 million. And conservatively, it may even be $80 million because, for one, your road construction standard has exponentially increased by FDOT. They have different grading requirements, different surfacing requirement, sidewalks, and all these things. And then two, everybody knows the construction cost has grown exponentially, especially road construction. So it is on them that they are now really doesn't even have the capacity to do what they said they were going to do. So we're going to see them in court on how we're going to deal with this. And to Troy's point, right now that whole thing is basically on a moratorium and nothing is being built. The plat that was going to be released is now stopped. So we also had to do cleanup because there is inadvertent impact on people. People, some of the developers, and then they work with the builders, and they don't necessarily know exactly what's going on. So they start to sell lots that are not platted, and then therefore you can't have legal description and all these things. So we did have to unwind a couple homeowners who really didn't do anything wrong. They were excited to move in their new home. All of a sudden, that home is not really for them to live in. So we have to do some negotiation with them to make sure those homeowners are protected. But those are the unintended consequences of these kind of stuff. But the large picture is that no more houses, that you really can't go plat anything. You can't build anything until we see the road. So that's I forget your question.
No, it's good.
No, it's all good. The question was kind of like, up front they're paying $20
inflation,
million.
Yes,
what happens between the gap?
I got carried away with my, but to your question, so the $20 million is, we know we're going to use that $20 million immediately. So there is a no indexing for that portion. Commissioner Waldron,
it's real-time money.
Yeah, and Troy, you remember Commissioner Waldron, when he was here, he was big on indexing construction cost and construction obligation. So every single contractor we have now is that based on your obligation, as long as you don't build it, or as long as that we are not building it, based on your phasing, it's going, every year it goes on, it'll be indexed.
It's progressive.
You'll get an inflation adjustment.
Progressive.
Yeah.
Right. And one of the things, and we're talking a lot about DRI's development of regional impact. We talk in acronyms a lot, so I'm trying to help out the audience a little bit.
I got it. We're good,
The difference between a large PUD and a DRI, because to me, the most dangerous thing coming into the county are not the DRIs, it's the larger PUDs that are really close to the threshold of
999
a DRI.
homes.
Yeah, 999 homes, and they take it right to that limit, and then all they have to do is pay the impact fees on the houses, which is never enough. How do we defend against those larger PUDs, in my opinion, that aren't paying their part?
Well, so we no longer have DRI. So that is already an outdated state definition. Development regional impact type of development has already retired. The concept has already retired. So now we're not really dealing with the threshold of 999 anymore. I think it really... It is a very loaded question. The question is, how do we hold the developers accountable who are building these large development? And whether or not impact fee is sufficient. So a couple of things. One is we are currently, the comprehensive plan update, a big component of it is to look at transportation mitigation. We currently have a concurrency program, which means that it's a prop share. So Troy, if you're building a development, you are impacting State Road 16, you are impacting 208. So those are the corridors you're going to be impacting. I'm going to calculate how much if I build this road to mitigate all the traffic that you're bringing in. And I'm going to tell you your share of that proportionate share, and you're going to have to pay that up front. It could be either 10 million, it could be 15 million. In addition to that, you have to pay impact fee, which mitigates each individual household. To whenever you build a house, you pay the impact fee, and that household will pay for the transportation impact, school impact, parks impact, and public safety impact, all of that. So the calculation of impact fee needs to be updated because it needs to catch up with inflation. It is a very state-regulated policy. We don't get to go outside of that. So that is part of the problem. The state requires you to do certain things, that you have to have a certain type of concurrency program. And the state is trying to have a balance of protecting both local government and property rights. So they don't want the local government to overcharge developers. So there are a bunch of protection mechanisms in place that you can't overcharge them. Your prop share has to be calculated a certain way. So if we ended up with a underfunded financial mechanism for all these mitigation, large part is because the state regulates the local government. And then I can see that, state government wants to make sure local government is not overgrowing our power and somehow hurting our development. But in St. Johns County's case, we are on the other side. We need more flexibility and freedom to hold our developers accountable, to make sure that we can charge them, not outside of what's in the formula. This algorithm that we're using is every day people get on the road and you keep bringing these new homes, but the county legally can't ask them to pay more. Yeah. So that's the challenge. We have to look at our concurrency program all over again, and that is something we're doing right now. We're looking at mobility fee as a hybrid addition to impact fee, which is a concept that the state does allow, but there is a lot of convoluted requirement that if you're instituting a mobility fee, how is it going to affect your impact fee and all these things. So anyway, I'm getting into too much of a weeds of these technicality. Right. But upfront mitigation is really critical for the county. So
you said they eliminated the DRI, so there's no separation. It's just basically household by household. Yeah. All right. Household by household, that gets passed down to the consumer. So that the impact fees on residential is going to be the household impact fees is going to be baked into whatever the house is going to cost. It's part of the reason why some of the housing is unaffordable in a lot of our areas. Yeah. Talk about impact fees for commercial, because we're so out of balance on commercial to residential. Is it? I know at one point it was like 87% to 13%. I think it's a little better than that right now. But to me, the commercial impact fees, need a little help to entice these developers, stop building so many houses and start building some industry here. Yeah. So is there some measures that the county's doing for those?
The county has already done that. We give 60% discount. Essentially, you can't really discount impact fee. So right now, commercial does not pay concurrency, which means that if you, Troy, you want to build a noodle shop somewhere and then you are impacting Racetrack Road, you really don't pay the concurrency. And in addition to that, impact fee, we have a buy down program, which impact fee by state law, you cannot waive. That's why we're struggling with affordable housing. You cannot just waive because impact is impact. It doesn't matter who lives there. And the state requires that if you treat one section of the users this way, you cannot treat other sections of the user the other way. So you can't waive them, but the county can use other parts of funding to buy down certain impact fee. And in commercial world, we do a buy down program. Well, I guess it's subsidy program where economic development will pay for that discount. So, but honestly, the divide or the perfect ratio of commercial to residential and that one perceived that we're not reaching is not, to me, and this is how I see it, is not because how much we're discounting the impact fee. They are part of the business decision making, but there are many other things. The land value is a huge deal from what I'm hearing, because I reach out the business and I wanted to entice them to come to St. Johns County if they fit our lifestyle and our needs. Land value is tremendously higher than many other surrounding areas. That's for one. And we do have a high impact fee, but it's not a deciding factor. One biggest deciding factor is availability of land. We have a lot of land. we don't have
Well,
a lot
it's a double
that
whammy.
were entitled for industrial and commercial. Yeah.
It's a double whammy because I mean you're
It's an official government term.
Yeah, it's
right?
a double whammy.
I like
Double
it.
whammy,
Yeah.
that's right.
Sure.
Yeah.
No whammies, no
We'll
whammies.
make sure that will make to the comprehensive plan.
But as a developer, you look at it and go, wow, okay, I'm paying 20% more for this acreage, and then that goes into our door fees, and then the impact fee hits you on top of that, and then we're talking concurrency. Tell me, you said something. You said mobility. You said concurrency. It's called one thing in like the city, and it's called another thing in the county. It is. What's the difference? Does the county look at mobility differently than concurrency? Because I look at them the same.
Concurrency is essentially prop share. So concurrency is that when you build, we calculate the entire impact on this impacted road, and then we divide up. You're responsible 50. I'm responsible 50. The gas station, it's already 100. So you're 50. I'm 30. Gas station 20. So then you pay your 50. But then you also have ongoing impact fee you're paying. So concurrency is really a mechanism for the county to ask developer to pay cash upfront. They do get impact fee credit for that because impact is impact. So you can overcharge them for the impact they generate. So if you pay $9 million for the impact that you generated, you get impact fee credit, which means all the houses going to your development is going to get a cut. You're not going to pay impact fee until that $9 million is already accounted for. And the state also instituted a law a couple years ago, which is a protection of development that you can transfer your impact fee credit within impact area. So you have Palencia, you have, I don't know, I'm thinking Palencia, and then you have the adjacent, I don't remember the development. So if there's building houses and Palencia is done with all their development, they are closing out, but they still have residual $3 million impact fee credit. They can sell that $3 million credit by state law to the adjacent development within that impact area. So then
Who made that decision?
the state did.
That's silly.
So
So it's a state mandate.
it is a state
that
mandate.
you guys have to deal with.
And essentially, we
ridiculous.
just lost the $3 million because
That
that was the money that we were going to collect from other development.
What a
So-
whammy.
Just so you guys understand, like the impact fees have to stay within the region in which those developments are at on a normal situation, but it now allows them to
Trade. Yeah.
to if there's a development, now it allows if there's a development in Hastings, instead of that money staying in Hastings, it might be traded over to the Volano.
Right.
That's
How
right.
long has that been the case?
I would say around 3 years from its
terrible.
Oh, we need to
implementation.
change that.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
And we,
Eye-opening,
as
Joy.
one of the county government, we fought for it. And of course, we submitted when the legislature was being discussed and bill was being contemplated. We submitted a bunch of revision and also impact analysis on the county. We were going to essentially lose hundreds of millions of dollars because they're now concurrency impact fee. I mean currency they can trade. Essentially, the money that goes to our road construction is going to dry out because of that.
That's a terrible decision.
That didn't go anywhere. So
We can definitely, can you fix it? Can we change that? What do you have to do to rally around something like that? Does anyone know?
well, it's fairly well established law now. So
Everybody's making you learn to make the adjustment when the state
Yeah.
hits you with those mandates, and
Okay.
a lot of things. Poor road and bridge probably gets hit with it the most with the ditches and stuff like that. They have mandates that have been on them for 20 years. It's near impossible what the state hits you with.
Wow.
So state mandates are probably in the world of government. I don't know if you would agree with this. Is probably one of the most difficult things to work with within the budget.
Yeah, and they have a lot more to also consider and contemplate too. And then, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining about our state delegations. I mean, they have been nothing but a great champion for St. Johns County. Senator Hudson, Speaker Renner, Representative Cindy Stevenson, and all the delegation, they bend backwards and forwards to figure out how they can bring more dollars and more positive impact to St. Johns County. This is a statewide issue, and they have to find that balance because there is also the voice of the private business side of it. And they want protection, and in their mind that I'm creating I'm paying all these money to mitigate the impact, but this impact is also, you can define that impact is the impact zone. So why can't I use that money that I pay for to mitigate that impact as long as the other development is in the impact zone? So there is definitely logic behind that law, but it has consequence on us for sure.
Yeah, you just made it more logical for me. I didn't realize. Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm just nervous in certain areas, and I don't think it would happen here because we have a pretty good balance within the board. In certain areas, there's areas that are not going to be as politically strong as some of the other areas, and it could push towards, say you're District 1 and I'm District 4, you have more political clout than District 1 because there's more money in yours than there is in my neighborhood. And you could pull some of that money using your political clout. So I could see it making the gap of the haves and have-nots really much bigger.
And if it's a state law, then a lot of time we are dealing with laws or bad consequence of the laws that because of Miami somehow, Dade County messed up something years ago, then they made a law to prevent that from happening again. But somehow we have to adhere to that too. So
yeah.